Welcome back to the search bar.
Right. And you do. You have to take time to celebrate the wins in life.
But then, I recently took another wine class with the Wine and Spirit Education Trust.
Yep. It's a great question, and it really is a pain point for so many law
So
firms.
many
And I think
firms find themselves hitting kind of that ceiling, right?
for
Where they,
that, time management becomes really important, but also holding yourself accountable. So
I love that. And as a business owner myself, it really speaks to me of kind of documenting processes.
you can't be surprised when I don't go mentor other attorneys.
Welcome back to the Search Bar, the podcast for law firm leaders who want smarter growth without the guesswork. Wine optional. I'm Eric Ritter, the SEO sommelier and founder of Digital Neighbor. With more than 12 years of experience helping law firms scale, I'm here to have insightful conversations with industry subject matter experts so you can learn from them. And if you're ready to dominate in today's AI-driven search environment, check out my Motion for Marketing Success System. It starts with a free discovery session, no fluff, just a clear path forward. The link is in the show notes. Now to today's episode, where we're exploring the vital intersection where law firm operations meet marketing strategy. As most law firm owners think of operations, right, as the back office and marketing as the front door, but really the truth is you can't scale one without the other. So I'm really excited for today because we're going to have someone who's going to help us bridge that gap. And I'm joined by the wonderful Laurin D. Johnson, a law firm consultant with MB Law Firm Consulting. And Laurin isn't just an observer, she's a former trusts and estates attorney with an LLM in taxation from Georgetown Law. As a certified exit planning advisor and disc behavioral expert, she understands the DNA of a structural firm, from attracting the right talent to building the leadership pathways that make a firm truly exit ready. Laurin, welcome to the Search Bar. I'm super excited to have you here today.
Hi, Eric. Thanks so much for having me. Excited to talk with you today.
Yeah. And before we get into it, since I am the SEO sommelier after all, and half of that is wine related sommelier, I have to toast to your taste. We talked a little bit about the wine before, and you mentioned that for everyday drinkable wine, you're a fan of Meiomi Pinot Noir, which I think is a fantastic choice, right? I always love a good Pinot Noir. It's one of my favorite grapes out there. But what I really was intrigued by is when you said it's time to celebrate, you go straight for the good stuff, right? It's a Dom
yes.
Perignon or a Veuve Clicquot. I love that contrast. It's a lot like a law firm growth, right? You need the reliable everyday system to
100%.
keep you moving, but always building towards those champagne moments of major success, right?
Right. And you do. You have to take time to celebrate the wins in life. And what I also love about champagne, especially a good champagne, is it honestly goes with everything. There's no meal, there's no snack, there's no occasion that champagne is not going to make it brighter, more interesting, and more fun.
I couldn't agree more. In my wine fridges, I've kind of let the sparkling kind of sit there. I've had like some rosés, et cetera, and kind of like not really paid much attention. But then, I recently took another wine class with the Wine and Spirit Education Trust and kind of went over like the sparkling and the bubbling and everything. I'm like, and I just have a new appreciation for it. And I'm like, to your point, it really goes with everything. It's a great wine that, a lot of times we just overlook and we don't even realize like this can go with anything. It's a great wine to have, even not the good stuff, but there's plenty of sparkling out there to have every day as well, I feel like.
Yes, absolutely. And for breakfast, for special occasions, my dad and I will often do what we call juiceless mimosas. And people say, Laurin, that's just champagne. And I say, well, no, but it's more, for breakfast, it's a juiceless mimosa.
I love that. I'm going to have to steal that, Lauren. I love a juiceless mimosa myself. That sounds amazing. Well, let's get into it here. Let's talk a
Right.
little bit about law firm growth. That's what the people are here for, right? They want to hear
Sure.
about that because when we talk about growth, right? It's not just a matter of adding, maybe from a marketing standpoint, more leads, maybe even from an operations side, more lawyers. But many firms find themselves hitting kind of that ceiling, right? Where they can't quite see, what am I going to do next? And they kind of, I've read that's what people call that invisible anchor, where kind of it drags and leadership bottlenecks and keeps the firm really from taking off with that anchor there. It can't be
Yeah.
agile. So you've seen and you see all the time these internal mechanics. And I would love to hear from you, why so many, even talented teams feel like they're running in place, right? Instead of moving forward.
It's a great question, and it really is a pain point for so many law firms. And I think for a lot of your small and mid-sized law firms, what's happened is they've grown organically over time, but their systems and their processes have not grown with them, right? So everybody sort of does things a little bit differently. The way that you handle things in the beginning worked when you were a small team of 2 or 3 attorneys. Now all of a sudden you're 10 to 15 attorneys. Everybody's doing things a little bit differently. Processes and systems aren't documented, but they're also not evaluated, right? So it's really hard to analyze the systems you have in place for what's working, what's not working, if you don't even have them documented. So that becomes part of the problem, right? You have these firm owners and it's like everything's up here. The idea of trying to delegate is impossible. I don't have time to document the process to then try to train somebody and then delegate. So I'll just do it myself. And then what you're left with is things, everybody's doing things a little bit differently. It gets really clunky and muddled. And what firms aren't doing is they're not stepping back and taking a look at what are different routine tasks that we're doing on a regular basis that we need to streamline to make more efficient. Sometimes even just stepping back and evaluating a few key processes can make a huge difference, but it's just making that a priority because for a lot of people, that's not particularly fun work and it's not billable. So it feels like that's not a priority, even though if you carve out a little bit of time now to streamline some of those systems, you actually put a lot more time back in your day, which can be used for billable hours and for managing the firm and originating business.
I love that. And as a business owner myself, it really speaks to me of kind of documenting processes and how important that is, right? Especially if you start, you might be, one person, you might have an assistant there, then all of a sudden you're growing and you can't, delegate or you can't have anybody else do it because you don't have it, I don't have it
Right.
almost productized, right? You don't have those systems laid out. And like you said, that's kind of that rock in a hard place because like I need so many billable hours, right?
Right.
Each week, so what kind of advice would you give someone who's kind of stuck kind of in that decision making phase of like, hey, I want to do this, but I also got to actually do the work because I have to hit these billable hours, right? I can't take that
Right.
much time away. What would you say to someone there?
I think for that, time management becomes really important, but also holding yourself accountable. So doing time blocking on your calendar can be really helpful for that, but you've got to hold yourself accountable. So when you put a block of, I need to focus on streamlining operations, looking at different processes, figuring out a plan, how to delegate, right? Start to write down think of what are 10 things that if you didn't have to do, your life would be happier and better and you'd have more satisfaction at work. Just start with that, right? 10 things off the top of your head. Then actually put a plan in place. Okay, I've identified some things that I'd love not to have to do anymore. Now I need to create a plan to actually delegate that, but put time on your calendar to work through that process. And maybe it's 30 minutes, 45 minutes a week. But if you put that on your calendar and actually honor that time, you don't schedule over it, you don't allow team members to schedule you don't allow clients, like that time is sacrosanct. Even just carving out that 45 minutes a week to start identifying things you can delegate and then following through with delegating, again, you are going to get a lot more time to actually focus on billing and originating if that's part of your role as well.
Yeah, I love that. That's such great advice, right? Kind of maybe even starting small, right? Like 30, 45
Yes.
minutes a week. That sounds super
Yeah.
achievable. But just as important as that is being accountable and actually protecting that time. Cause you see that
Yes.
over and over myself is why I block off the time and people are like, oh, I can just book a meeting there. Then
Yep.
eventually the time never gets used for its intended purpose. So I think that's great
Right.
advice there, Lauren. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Of course.
Awesome. So I want to transition here a little bit into something else because we often obsess over the what cases and revenue while ignoring the who, right? And the how. And I think those are really important because, a lot of people are driven, a great salary, but often that's not enough to keep top talent in a firm as you're growing. um, that culture where everyone feels invested in the firm's success is very important. Myself, I've worked internally in different law firms, and the culture plays a big role, right? If you have just a constant rotation of new attorneys and lawyers coming in, that's a whole different atmosphere than like, hey, these partners or these attorneys have been here, for several years. It makes a big difference from everything there. So I would like to dive kind of into that culture a little bit more, maybe even a cultural engine that actually drives long-term growth. So what do you see kind of as a benefit to law firms if they focus on this, and how do they focus on it?
It's a great question, and I think it cannot be overstated the importance of firm culture and really investing in your people. As you mentioned, I'm a certified exit planning advisor through the Exit Planning Institute, and one of the things that they talk about all the time is like in companies, the greatest component of unlocked value potential valuation of a company is really sort of these what they call the four intangibles, right? And they don't show up on your accounting software. So it's about your people, the human component of your business, the structural, the operations processes in place, your customers, the relationship with those, how you nurture them, build them, retain them, and then also the social component of a business. And so if somebody's coming in and looking to buy your company, those are the things that have the greatest value potential and value add. And so it is not just a good thing to do to invest in the culture and the people in your firm. It's necessary. And I think for so long in law firms and in a lot of different firms, that has been overlooked. It's not a huge priority. It feels like an afterthought. And I think, and what studies are showing is that you can't afford for that to be an afterthought. They've released a lot of studies that talk about how if somebody at your law firm feels like they've got a really good friend, a best friend in the office, the likelihood that they will stay with your firm years and years longer than they might otherwise because they have that at least one person that they really feel like is a friend in the firm um, is quite incredible, sort of the impact that can make. And so we talk a lot with firms about this concept of firm citizenship. And I will admit, I sort of geek out over this concept because I think, one, I just love the phrase firm citizenship, but I think it's so important. And that is really about actively contributing to the firm's culture, the firm's success, and the community. And it goes above billable hours. So part of the problem, right, is that you have a firm and most compensation models are based on the number of hours that you are able to bill and what you can originate. And that makes sense, right? Because if you don't have those things in place, the firm isn't profitable, right? So if you're not profitable, you can't pay people, you can't pay bonuses. So it absolutely makes sense that that is, the compensation structure is rooted in that. The problem with if your compensation is only grounded in those two bases is that you have to think about the culture that you're cultivating. Because what happens is you're actually disincentivizing people from participating in broader firm initiatives because it's actually against my own financial self-interest. If all I do is get rewarded on how much I bill and how much I originate, you can't be surprised when I don't go mentor other attorneys, when I don't make it a priority to write articles and blogs for the firm, and I maybe don't engage in other speaking engagements, and I don't help spearhead recruiting efforts and things like that, because that's actually against my own financial self-interest. And so you need to reward and incentivize the behavior that you want to see. I'm not saying that you're going to reward it the same way you will how much somebody bills and how much somebody originates. But if you can carve out sort of an incentive discretionary bonus pool and really reward firm citizenship, explain that it has to be tied to profitability. That's another thing that firms are not transparent enough in talking about, that the firm needs to be profitable for us to pay you and for us to consider bonuses. When those discussions are talked and you bring people into those conversations, you start helping them think like business owners and they feel like everybody's rowing in the same direction and that they are part of something bigger than themselves. And so, identifying what are the things that are important to the firm, and that can change, right? You may be in a real growth stage where thought leadership, marketing, cross-selling among departments, trying to generate new business from existing clients, those are the current priorities of the firm. Well, build that into the conversations that you're having, build that into the culture. Maybe you're in a phase where growth is not the highest priority. It's really about mentoring the next crop of young associates coming up through the ranks, your leaders. It's about um, legal excellence and mastery. It's about professional development, things like that. That's okay. As your firm changes and ebbs and flows, you're going to have different priorities for that firm citizenship concept. But it's something that firms really, they can't afford not to invest time and thought into what firm citizenship means to them, and then bringing everybody at the firm into those conversations so they understand what the vision of the firm is, what the core values are, and then how they can play a role in that.
I love that, Lauren. I've not heard the term firm citizenship before, but I think that makes so much sense, right? And it just shows how important each individual contributor can be, right? Kind of being that
Yes.
citizen in the law firm, to kind of feel like they're a part of the whole, and they play their role in that, in the entire firm. I'm curious if you, because I always like to, I give people some tangible takeaways here. You mentioned, if you're just incentivizing monetarily, that then kind of goes almost against the firm's citizenship. So I'm wondering if you have any, like, if there's like non-monetary, gosh, that shouldn't be a tongue twister, or come on, non-monetary shifts, right? That
Yep.
maybe a firm can make, over the next couple months, let's say 3 months, to improve their retention rate and kind of help empower people to become, citizens of the firm.
Yes. And there are, right? Because I think you firms have to be realistic. There's only so much money to go around. And so I think also figuring out ways, how do we attract our talent, retain them, really sort of double down on that firm citizenship concept and help make this a better place to work. So a few sort of action items is there can be a real lack of transparency in small to mid-sized firms in terms of how one progresses through the firm. So I start as an associate. How do I become a senior associate? If that's a title, how do I move into, say, an income partner? How do I move up to become an equity partner? A lot of times when you talk to associates, they feel like there's not a clear path to progression. They feel in the dark. And then when people are promoted, it can feel arbitrary. If you're passed over, it can feel, oh, well, it's just because the managing partner likes that person over me. There's not a clear rubric in place of what the expectations are at each role and the milestones that you need to achieve. If you can document that for the people in the firm, bring them into those conversations, they know what the expectations are. They know what they're shooting for. They know that there is a path. You're also letting them know you see a future for them at this firm. It doesn't mean that if you hit all these milestones, you are guaranteed a promotion to the next level. It simply warrants you as the employee going to the managing partner or partners, to the decision makers, and saying, hey, based on this attorney advancement framework that you've outlined, I believe I've hit the milestones that would at least warrant us having a conversation about me receiving a promotion. Can we talk about that? So you empower your employees to have those conversations as well. There's other ways, again, mentoring is so important. Giving your associates access to technology, giving them the platform to make suggestions of technology they'd like to bring into the firm. They have done studies, ABA has done studies talking about how associates now, technology is really important to them as they're evaluating offers for fairly comparable offers from two firms. If one is going to allow them more access to the technology, even if it's a slightly lower base salary, they're willing to take that because they know that technology is so important for them and in the legal field, right? So giving them access to that. In addition, you can help them build their resume and their accolades. So recommending networking organizations, sponsoring them for membership, using your contacts to help them score speaking opportunities, writing opportunities, things like that. Again, you're not spending money to do those things, but
Right.
what you're doing is you're helping them become a subject matter expert, a thought leader in the industry, which is going to help their resume. It's also going to increase their ability to become more profitable for your firm. More people who know who you are and what you do, the more people there are that can likely refer business your way. So those are a few ways that, again, has nothing to do with paying somebody more, giving them a bigger bonus, that you can do that really is going to help improve the firm culture.
I love that. So many great nuggets you shared there, Lauren. So I
Yeah.
hopefully people at home taking notes, or kind of thinking about themselves, what they can do in their firm. For me, you shared what really resonated was, the transparency, right? Like just being open, sharing, especially small, mid-sized firms, that can be difficult. And there's so many opportunities there, right? There's so many organizations, bar associations, speaking opportunities, right? Especially, if you have maybe an attorney and associate on staff, that's a go-getter. They'll probably bring opportunities to use like, hey, there's this conference going
Absolutely.
on. There's this, and encouraging that and kind of creating an environment where people are bringing those to you, almost doing the work
Right.
for you, right? And then you're just encouraging that and facilitating that. I think that's an easy way to kind of build that citizenship without, bonus or, monetary
Right.
things behind there.
And you're empowering them and you're helping them develop the skills that are going to make them successful as attorneys, right? So if you sponsor them to go to a continuing legal education course, have that associate come back and then present a lunch and learn to the
Yes.
firm, right? Because one, you're putting in a position of leadership. They're developing their presentation skills, but you're also making sure that the firm is the beneficiary of the knowledge that they've gained from that course, that they've taken.
I think lunch and learns are so powerful and underutilized personally, right? If
They
someone's
are.
going to a conference or whatever kind of education, that whole firm needs to learn about it, I feel like.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I want to move us along here, Lauren. There's so much good stuff to get through. And so we talked about fixing the engine, building that culture. Now I want to look a little bit in that crystal ball about the future, right? So if you want to scale effectively now, that means building a firm you can eventually thrive without you at the
Yes.
center, right? Without making every decision. So you obviously, you mentioned you're a certified exit planner. You help leaders plan for the long game, right? Kind of what does that look like? So would love to understand how do you build that clear path towards leadership and that potentially successful exit there at the end.
Yeah. It's a great question, and it's one of those things that people don't think about early enough, right? Exit planning is just good business planning, right? You really want to be constantly, as the business owner, in the mindset of how do I make sure that this firm can function without me? What am I doing to create value in this firm that's transferable? It just simply gives you more options in the long run. So I would say one of the first and easiest things firms can do is to start de-risking. So that, yes, you're going to take a look at, do you have the right insurance policies in place? Well, when's the last time you've done an audit? All of that kind of stuff. But then starting to document your processes and creating redundancy and additional training. So we talk about the planned exit, right? But what about an unplanned exit or an unplanned temporary exit? This happened to me early in my law career. I was in a bad car accident and was
Mm.
unable to work for a period of time. And during that time, I was unable to communicate with the firm, right? We don't think about that in terms of I'm out of the office unexpectedly, you're dealing with a family tragedy, but you can typically still communicate with the firm. What if you can't? What if you're, God forbid, in a coma or something like that? Can somebody step in? Is payroll going to get made without you? Do people know where you bank? Can anybody else sign checks? Can people deposit checks? Like what happens is all of a sudden you weren't there, but you couldn't communicate what has to happen to run that firm. Having those processes documented is so crucial. Having a sort of in case of emergency plan. If you're not available, can somebody step into your shoes and be able to sort of how seamlessly would they be able to step into your shoes to make sure that the day-to-day operations of the firm still stand? I think a lot of firms, they don't have things like that in place, and it's really, really crucial. That's also an incredibly pivotal shift as you start to de-risk in terms of creating a business that can run without you, that is not solely tied to the firm owner to be able to run. And that's really the goal, right? Is that
Mhm.
that's what a stable value that's transferable is a firm that does not need that one person. Like they're not going to fall apart. If you're the only one that has ever communicated with clients at the vendors, anyway, you're the point
Oh,
person
yeah.
for everything, and you're out one day, nobody has the ability to step into your shoes.
I love that. How you put that kind of creating those redundancies helps
Yes.
set you up for the future for everything to work without you, right? And having
Yep.
those processes in place. Awesome. That was so much great content, Lauren. I do want to kind of sum everything up at the end. At the end of the episode, I like to bring things back. We have a closing checklist here with the 5 steps to operational scaling and firm citizenship. I know we got 5 different points on there, so I'll just read them out and then you can just add on to each of them if that works. So I'll start with number 1, which was audit your bottlenecks.
Yes. It's really important. You've got to take a step back and look at where you're getting slowed down, be honest about it, and then really sort of start to create that delegation framework. What do you like? What are you doing because you really enjoy doing it? What are you doing because you're just simply afraid to hand it off? One of my close friends, who's a tax attorney in Boston, he said one of the best pieces of advice he got early on in his career was from one of his mentors who said, if I think somebody can do a task 70% as well as I can do it, that means I should delegate it out because I can take it the next 30%, but they've saved me a lot of time. And by the way, after I train them on the next 30%, the next time I have them do the same thing, they'll probably get it 85% of the way there. So it is starting to making sure you have the right people in the right seats and really trusting in them, understand it's okay that they're not going to do it 100% as well as you would. You carry it to the finish line. That's going to be a lot less time than you saying, I've got to do the whole thing. I'm just not comfortable delegating anything out.
That makes so much sense. I love kind of that example there, right? Of kind of if someone can do it a certain amount, they're just going to get better and better from there. And I think
Yes.
that's also a great number 1, right? That's a great place to start there. Is kind of looking at those bottlenecks. So let's look at number 2,
Yeah.
which
Yep.
is defining firm citizenship.
Yes. This is, again, ways that people contribute to the success of the firm outside the hard numbers, such as billable hours and originations. Figuring out who are you as a firm? What are your values? What's important to you? And what are different initiatives and programs that are going to make the firm collectively stronger? Bring your people into those conversations so that you're all rowing in the right direction and reward people accordingly, right? Your salary covers you doing your job. When people are going above and beyond to enhance the culture, if it's, having more social events and somebody says, I'll take lead and I'm going to plan quarterly social events for the firm, they need to be recognized for that as well because they're helping the overall health of the firm. They're going to make it stronger, which means you're more profitable because you're also going to retain your people longer. And it costs a lot more to replace somebody than it does, when you have to go out and replace somebody, that costs a lot of time, a lot of money, right? So again, investing in the time to keep your people and programs that will do it, and then rewarding people that are really contributing to that and moving those initiatives forward for you.
Love that. So speaking of recognition and kind of keeping people, that brings us to number 3 here, which is building leadership pathways, right?
Yes. You've got to document those pathways, bring your people into the conversations. They need to know what you expect of them and how they can move up forward through the firm. I can't tell you how many stories I hear talking with law firm managers. They have a great associate. They love them. Everybody at the firm loves them. They're thinking this is going to be equity partner in like 7 to 10 years, right? Like that's the trajectory they're on. But it's not communicated with the associate and they take a job at a competing firm. Sometimes it's hardly any more money. Sometimes it's just for the title bump. Well, I'm a senior associate now. And the firm says, well, we would have made you a senior associate. They said, I didn't know you saw that pathway for me and I've already accepted the offer. So it's really documenting that process, bringing people into the conversation and then having check-ins with your people throughout the year. Sometimes formal reviews, people stiffen up. It's tied to compensation. They're very, they're afraid to be a little more candid. If
Yeah.
you have sort of quarterly check-ins with people, what's going well, what's not going well, you're going to get better answers in terms of how satisfied they are in the role, and it will help you develop opportunities for their highest and best use.
Love that. So let's move to number 4, which I think is a really important one, but sounds like it can be very tricky. And number 4 is align operations with culture.
Yes. Operations are the backbone of the firm, right? So they've got to be strong. Everything stems from there. Marketing, right? Marketing is so important to firms. They spend all this time and focus on marketing. But if your intake process can't support all the leads that you're getting, it doesn't work, right? So you spend all this time focusing on generating those leads, but then you can't handle them. Same comes with your culture, right? Your operations has to support and reinforce the culture and what's important to the firm, right? You've got to use your framework of sort of what are the firm's core values, and decisions need to be made based on those core values. If you always go back to that, if your people understand what the firm's core values are, they will inherently understand changes, initiative, programs that the firm initiates, because they're going to say, that's the framework. That makes sense to me. Our core values are these 5 things. Everything the firm prioritizes supports that. So it's so all intrinsically linked. And a lot of firms that feel clunky and disjointed, it's because they're not focusing, they haven't identified their core values. They don't keep going back to it, and they don't make decisions based on that. When you do that, your people feel like they're more in the know. The firm feels less chaotic. It feels very intentional. And that's important for people.
Yeah. I loved how you put that at the end there, right? It feels very intentional versus random, right? And that rings so true, I'm sure, to myself and to a lot of other people there. Love that. So, number 5 on the checklist is plan your exit early, right?
You cannot start planning that early enough, really, because part of planning an exit is making sure that your business goals are aligned with your personal goals. What are you going to do next, and aligned with your personal financial goals, right? You've got to be thinking about all of those things. And really, when it comes to the firm, it's about giving yourself options so that when you do exit, it's on your terms and it's done in a way that feels good, and that you don't then regret it afterwards. So really, it's about, how do I create more value in this firm? How do I establish a firm that can run without me? That's really such a value add. And so again, that needs to be part of the decisions that you're making when you're looking. How do we grow? How do we scale? Hiring decisions, firing decisions, all of those decisions. If you're thinking about sort of the larger picture, people think of exit planning as like, okay, I'm ready to retire, and so I'll take 6 months to figure that out, and then I'm out of the firm. If that is sort of your mindset and it's all about value creation, the people in the firm, they're going to buy into that model because they understand that you are creating this legacy that is going to far surpass you, which also signals to them job security, and that they also have the opportunity to become a leader in this firm, right? If you're working at a firm where everything is tied to that one founder, that one managing partner, all the relationships are through him and her, everything, what you're saying is, there's a ceiling for me in this firm, because once they retire, the firm might close. And so that doesn't feel great, right? You want to know that I could be here the rest of my career, and I could rise up through the ranks, and I can have a real say in how things are get done at one point. And so that all ties into that, sort of exit planning mindset, which is it's just good business strategy.
Yeah. I love that, Lauren. That was amazing. I think I was fast and furious. So much great information, Lauren. Thank you so much for joining us here on the podcast and really showing that scaling a law firm, from where you are today to that exit is as much about people and processes as it is about just practicing the law. I think the listeners came away with a great roadmap, and even that checklist at the end, right? That 5-point checklist for turning a practice into a true business engine for them. But before we wrap today, Lauren, can you maybe share where listeners can connect with you, maybe learn more about MB Law Firm Consulting, and maybe find the tools that you went over today?
Yes, absolutely. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. And you can also go to our website. I believe that will be that information will be provided for you, but we've got a lot of information on our website about the type of work we do. And also, yes, please connect with me on LinkedIn.
Amazing. We'll put your LinkedIn and put the firm law firm in the show notes so everybody
Great.
can find them there and connect with you there. So thank you so much, Lauren. And for our listeners, if you're ready to scale smarter, not harder, book your free discovery session with me for the Motion for Marketing Success System. You'll find a link in the show notes as well. And if you enjoyed today's episode, share it with a colleague, leave us a review. It helps more firms and leaders find the strategies that actually drive growth. Until next time, stay curious, stay grounded, and keep building a law practice you genuinely love. Cheers. And Lauren, thank you again for being a great guest.
Thank you, Eric. It was so much fun being here.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone.